that it puts commissions and paying composers well within reach of everybody. It puts a new piece within reach of everybody, because instead of saying, I need, this many thousands of dollars from one person to create a new work, instead you can go for much smaller amounts from many people. And to sum it up, I would say that this is a win-win business practice for everybody involved, because for the composer, you can get as much money as you feel you need on a project simply by continuing to add participants. And we'll talk later about some strategies for doing that and building those relationships. And for the composer also, instead of one premiere, you get endless premieres, regional premieres. And that's a really big deal, because the piece doesn't just die on the vine after one performance, kind of like orchestra world. It goes on and on and on. And it's great for the participants. They, of course, get their names in the published score, whether it's digital or print and both. They get their names on the websites. They get their names in any kind of PR. And they get the glory of participating in this new work and having the special experience of bringing it to life. So that would be my summation of what consortia or consortium are. Sure.
Michael, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, that really covered a lot of what I did with the Child Refugee Awareness Choral Consortium. I think that there were 3 levels of participants. There was the major commissioners, which I had 2, and then there were the participating choirs, in which I had 17. And then there were 3 sponsors who, between the 4 of them, sponsored 4 choirs. So actually, I should say, instead of 17 participating choirs, there were 13 participating choirs and 4 choirs that had no budget whatsoever but wanted to participate. And that's where the sponsors came in and sponsored those choirs. So there were 19 choirs in all. And it was an incredible variety of different choirs involved in the consortium.
I want to get into the idea of levels of participation and different buy-ins in a second, but before we get there, as far as I can tell, there's really 2 ways to think about consortiums, and correct me, either of you, if I'm missing something, but you could start by saying, here's my commission fee and I want to meet it, and then as each participant comes in, the individual level for each member becomes lower and lower. Or you can set a fixed fee for each member, and then you run the risk of not actually meeting your goal, but you have all the other benefits of people participating at the same time. Are there other ways that you have set up those models, either of you?
I'm for plan B on that one. I think I have, in all of my experiences with consortiums, it's always been the same price for everybody, with the exception on occasion that someone who is called the lead commissioner, who is the person who will kind of oversee the project and oversee all the participants, they might have a larger buy-in, and they might want to have the first of the rollout premieres reserved for them. But I've always done it so that, separate from whatever they may or may not do extra, sometimes they just pay the same as everybody else, that I've always done it where everybody just pays the same amount of money, and that keeps everybody on equal footing, and you just keep reaching out to get more people. It's true, if you say it's going to be this amount of money, and if you fall short of that, that would be the case in either scenario, though. And the trick going into the money side of it is, I feel, to keep the individual participations really within reach. I will flat out say that that almost all of mine are $550 now. 500 is a really typical number. You can do them for less. Obviously, the cheaper, the better. I mean, I was just at the CBDNA regional band conference, in Sonoma, Washington. I'm still recovering from all of that, clearly, and.
Well, it is Sonoma after all.
I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who, but they were doing a buy-in of just $100 for, and to me that would be risky, because it means you've got to get a zillion people involved. But it certainly meant that it was more appealing than a $500 one, because he was a band director, and he was just saying, oh yeah, $100, that's a no-brainer. and he'll sign on to several of those a year, as opposed to looking at his budget and saying, well,
Sure.
500, I might only have one or two of those. So that's the upside and the downside. Michael?
I'll jump in with that. You have an incredible reputation of, just making these really wild pieces that everybody knows Alex Shapiro. And I'm so glad that I'm your friend. I think for me, I'm trying to establish myself. So I'm coming from it in a different direction. For me, I would say the most important thing, obviously, I want to, make a fair amount of money, a professional fee to write this. But for me, the 19 performances and the chatter around my piece was where it's at. For me, actually, one of the biggest progresses, or the goals, or not the goals, but I knew I got to a certain point when I got tagged by a friend on Facebook saying they're talking about your piece, but it wasn't people I knew. It wasn't anybody that I knew. And that was like, okay, I achieved a certain goal by getting to that point, because for me, this is a slow build, but it's a very strong, sturdy foundation that I'm trying to build. And so this consortium of 19 performances really served that purpose and did wonderfully. I've gotten interest in doing other projects from doing this consortium. And I'm known now as a composer that is very focused on the refugee crisis, which I'm really, proud of being part of that. And that's because so many people were working on this two particular pieces. I did a lot of extra. What was that? Oh, okay, I did a lot of extra. I had actually ended up including a second piece overall. So because the first piece was very advanced, and I had middle school choirs and elementary choirs that wanted to be part of this, and I was like, I can't say no. I have to find a way to include them, but it's an advanced piece. So I wrote a second piece for the consortium, and I know that I'm kind of doing a lot of extra work for the price. I actually decided in the beginning, my goal was to raise $10,000. Now, why $10,000? In this case, I was giving 50% of my commission fee to Lamia, the refugee that wrote the poem. And so I felt that, okay, making $5,000 on this project would be appropriate for me. I fell way short of that, but I feel that for a first consortium, this was an incredible success. My tiers in this case were much lower, again, because I'm starting out. I know that as I get more of a track record, if you will, I'll bring up those prices. But my actual initial opt-in for choirs was $80. I wanted to keep it under 3 digits because I wanted that choir director, and I had several of them, that said, my district can't afford this. They don't give me a budget, but I'm going to pay for this out of my pocket. And so I had, that was the participating choir, and they got a Skype session with it. So this is a no-brainer for them. They get a PDF of the score that they can replicate. There's no premieres. They don't get premiere rights, but a PDF of the score, and they get a Skype session to go with it with me. And then the major commissioners got 2 Skype sessions along with the PDF. And that was $250 for each one. Again, these are prices where I'm offering them just to start out because I wanted I wanted my first choral consortium to be set up to succeed no matter what, because I knew I was going to make mistakes along the way, which I did, and yet it still was a very positive experience for everybody. It seems everybody's very happy.
I think I'm so impressed by what you did and how you did it and the thought that you put into doing it, Michael. I mean, I remember talking to you a little bit about this, when you were starting the project, and it was absolutely a success. And you bring up so many good points. First of all, about, yes, just like with anything, in different parts of our careers, we're going to be, put our price point in different places, obviously.
Right.
In different parts of our careers, we're going to go above and beyond. And all of us have done that on projects, as you did, giving them an extra piece, etc. We definitely do that. It's always circumstantial. It's, you know, project by project, it's going to be a different mix of things. It depends who you're dealing with and what the needs are. And you're talking about first of all, the buzz, so to speak, the PR, the fact that the natural PR, not artificial, not somebody posting something artificially, you know, that you've paid to do that. But instead, the best buzz of all is, as you said in the beginning, when people that you don't even know are talking about the project, when it resonates with people so much and they're excited about it, and that's how you broaden your whole sphere of colleagues and supporters and people who dig what you do and really want to hear more of what you do. That's the magic right there. I mean, there's so many good things about this model, and you have benefited really well from all of those.
And now I've come to the next level where now I have these outstanding performances that are recordings. And since I'm not on shelf at JW Pepper, but I'm on demand at JW Pepper. In other words, somebody who orders it, they contact me and I print it up from my home printer and everything. I send it out right away. You know, so, but of course, when you're in their catalog or when you're on their website, you need a good quality recording, of which, you know, the president of the New Jersey ACDA, president-elect of New Jersey ACDA, was one of the people who opted in and has this incredible, outstanding performance. I will say one of the things, though, is that she performed it at a much slower tempo than what I attended it for. And it's still an incredible interpretation, but it's one of those things where my advice is, especially when you know you have this gem of a group that's participating, is try to get to hear it in rehearsal first. She was the one group that she actually asked for me to talk about it and remake recordings of speaking about it rather than listening in on a rehearsal, because she didn't have time for that. And I wish that I had said, well, let me just be a fly on the wall. I don't need to say anything, you know. It still was a fabulous performance, and it still makes sales because now it's on JW Pepper. But the recordings, it's really an incredibly valuable part of this. When you have 19 groups opting in and you have all those recordings, there are some that you're like, yeah, I could really, you know, use this to promote the piece. Right. And then, you know, and that's the next step, is getting published.
I want to step back to the prices, though, because and Michael hit on this. Actually, Alex, you did a little bit also. I think you have to find a balance between who you're writing music for and who the audience is. Now, the consortiums that Alex was speaking about tend to be high school and then college and university level bands. And I'm working on a middle school band, and their budgets are just smaller. So in consultation with my lead director, we both agreed that $250 is an ideal buy-in level, but that can be more than most middle school band budgets. So we also created a lower level that has less benefit, but it allows more people to participate, and that's essentially what Michael was doing too. But I think there is a place for also valuing what you bring into the consortium once you've established yourself as a composer, and that's what Alex has done, where you can say, listen, I know that you're going to get a lot out of this, and that $500 is not unreasonable. That's a pretty typical band consortium.
But you make a very good point about making it within reach for these schools, many of which, for whom $500 would be a lot of money. So I'm curious, Garrett, tell us, where did you draw the line of what's being offered between a $250 and a $100, or whatever your splits were, in terms of a group that paid more and a group that paid less? What was the difference in what they got?
This was decided between me and Aaron, the lead director. We came up with this together because he is a middle school band director and he has a lot of insight. Right. First thing we did was separate out. Everyone gets a Skype session. And then at the higher level, I'm also providing some composition guidance for the teachers, because we want to encourage their students to be writing music and crafting art and sound. So I'm going to create a PDF resource for these teachers, and then I'm going to be holding essentially a composition masterclass webinar, and all the students that are interested in any of these schools will be given the link. It'll be a Zoom conference like this. And then I'll be able to interact directly with the students all around the world, wherever they may be, to essentially give some composition feedback and insight. And then if they're local, I will do my best to show up at rehearsals and performances.
That's really, really great.
Love that.
Yeah.
The concept of including the Zoom is such a great idea, and to be able to, and that's something I'm going to bring into one of my new commissions consortiums is the Great American Coral Reef. And now that you mention that, I'm going to learn how to do that so that I could say to everybody, look, here's a date. I'm going to set it up so that anybody can join. I'm going to talk about the Great American Coral Reef. We're going to talk about our ideas. And that's great. That's a great value.
Yeah, thanks. I think so too. We're really excited about it. And I know a few other people here in the room who are listening are doing something similar. I know Chris and I had a long talk. He's building a choral consortium for a sacred work, and he's created multiple buy-in levels as well. Let's talk about how we get the word out. It's nice to say I'm building a consortium, but then you actually have to get people to sign up. So what have both of you done to market the consortium and generate buzz? And then adding on to this, what is the role of the lead ensemble or director in recruiting more people?
Alex, why don't you start?
Go for it, Alex.
No, I was going to let Michael start.
Okay.
I have a lot to say about this.
Okay. Well, I didn't have a lead choir. I'm really intrigued by the lead choir idea. With the Great American Coral Reef Consortium, which I'm starting now, which is actually more of a project than a consortium, and I could talk a little bit about it later if we have time. But I'll just say this: I have a collaborating choir. The collaborating choir actually is the choir that's helping me establish the piece and to create the piece and the project in itself, because it really has a lot to do with improvising and stuff like that. The collaborating choir is a choir that I can go to for as much as I need to in order to develop this and make my mistakes on. I forgot where I was going with this point. I totally blanked on what I was about to say.
About having a lead commissioner.
Oh, thank you. So thank you. So the collaborating choir, I said to her, and by the way, the collaborating choir director is Dr. Doreen Freiling, of David and Doreen Freiling. They have a lot of connections in the choral world, and I said to her, my point is that she's going to help me find other choirs. She's going to help me spread the buzz. In fact, she's very excited about possibly presenting this choral consortium and project at next year's ACDA conference, which is the national conference. So by collaborating with somebody with so many connections and that's so enthusiastic about it, I'm really counting on her to spread the buzz, even when I tag her, because she likes me to tag her in all the social media things for this. Her entire audience sees the consortium because of that. So the collaborating choir in my case is very similar to, I guess, a lead choir.
And then what are you doing to market this? How are you getting more people's eyes and ears interested in what's happening?
Well, that is something I'm still trying to really find a good way to do that. I mean, I have a newsletter. I have 600 on my newsletter, so that's one way to get the word out. I do Facebook Live videos, which really a lot of people watch. I think Facebook makes their live videos very prevalent, in terms of makes it very easy for people to see. Usually within the first hour, there's at least 70 people that have viewed the Facebook Live session already. The other thing that I do is when choirs sign on, you could ask them, do you know any other choirs that might be interested in doing this? And I'll throw one other thing out there, which just came about today, actually, with this new consortium. And that is this. This is actually a really neat, not trick, but just like an idea that came about through a discussion. So there was this choir that is trying to really meet their budget every single year. They're struggling with getting people in the seats and everything. So they teamed up with a high school choir to do the Vivaldi's Gloria. And she said it was great. She's like, I did it selfishly because I wanted, we needed to build our budget, and of course all the parents came and everything. And I said, you also provided great a great experience for those kids, you know, and those students. So another way to recruit, I said, by the way, I said, this would be great. You know, this Great American Coral Reef would be great for your group if you want to collaborate with another choir and do a performance together. And she got all excited about the idea of, she's a retired choral teacher, so she got all excited about the idea of actually contacting her local choir that she used to work with, the high school that she used to work at, and actually for them both joining the Coral Reef, the consortium together, and giving a dual performance. So there's now 2 choirs opting in because they're actually going to double their audience because they're local to each other. So I think that that's kind of a neat little trick to get, you know, to generate buzz locally, but also to get 2 choirs involved, you know, in the consortium, because there's a benefit to them and their concerts if they perform together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alex, why don't you answer some of that?
Okay, trying to think where to start. The most important tool I think we all have as we go through our careers, and this is true in the beginning of our careers as well as in the middle. The end of our careers doesn't matter because you're 6 feet under, so who cares? But the most important tool we have is our database, our contacts, the email addresses and names, and hopefully warm and fuzzy moments we've had either in email, on Facebook, or in person, ideally, in a perfect world, or in Skype, with the people with whom we deal. I will share my experiences in the band world, which hopefully some of what I say will be relevant to everybody here. Because at this point, I've been writing band music now for 10 years, and I have, depending on how you count, either 10 or 13 band pieces. That's, you know, a decent catalog at this point. So and I'm also very hands-on. I think you guys, we were talking about this before, that as with Michael, as with Garrett, I build in a value added to every one of my commission participants, is that it includes Skype sessions, usually 2. One, either before I've written a note of music, often just talking with them about their new piece, and the other one when we're in rehearsal or thereabouts. And so that's a lot of Skyping, especially if, let's say, it's 20 or 30 schools on a consortium. But for other people who are buying the music and performing it, I always offer that as an option, the Skyping, the Skype rehearsals, and that has become incredibly valuable. So let me back up a little bit and tell you how I'm building my database and how this matters to everybody here. When you come across somebody who is interested in your music, or in a perfect world has bought it, has performed it, you know, whatever, is connected to you professionally, I'm sure that everybody here does put them in their contact, but make sure that you put in as much information, you know, their contact information and where they're based, and if they're in the school, you know, where are they? And also what piece were you talking about, or what piece did they perform? And if you have done a Skype with them, it's really important, or if you've met them in person and have had a nice conversation, put that in your little contact thing. I don't use any fancy app. I use the Apple little address book, you know, that we all have on our Macs. That's all I use. And I create a subgroup, you know, we can have those groups. I have one of concert wind band conductors or directors. That's it. Really simple, old school. What has happened is I'm going on 2,000 contacts, personal contacts at this point.
Wow.
And when I fund something, if I want to raise $20,000, I can probably do it in about 3 days. And I will tell you the trick that is valuable to, I think, to everybody here, because this has worked so well. If I know the nature of the piece that someone has come to me, either that they would like to see put together, or as I did recently on my most recent electroacoustic wind band piece, I decided that I wanted to make an adaptation of an existing piece. It was an electroacoustic sextet, and I thought, wow, this would be great for wind band. And another band director thought so too, and I was off and running, and I put that consortium together. I think he added maybe 3 or 4 people, and I added the rest. And the way I do it is I know what grade level, as we say in band music, you know, we're talking about grade levels, difficulty levels, and I knew where this would sit. And so I typed in the names, and in my group, I did a search for a few different searches of names of pieces that were about the same difficulty level that are already in my catalog. up came a gazillion band directors who have played those pieces and bought those pieces, right? So they're already positively connected to me musically. Out of that group, I did a sub-search for Skypersal or Skype or something that would connect me even more personally to them. And that's the group that was a smaller number. And those are the group, those are the people that each received not a group email. I never ever do that, ever, but a personal email from me. Now, the template in the middle was, copy and paste in terms of what the project is and what I'm trying to do. But the whole beginning of the letter and the end were very personal to them and my relationship with them. And that has been a really effective way for me throughout the years to put these consortiums together. Somebody, I think earlier in the comments, had asked, does the lead commissioner, that was Ian, wrote, does the lead commissioner participate in bringing in other groups? Absolutely. And when I was starting out, my very first consortium piece was a wind symphony called Immersion, 3-movement wind symphony, pretty sizable. And that one, I had a lead commissioner, which was Jerry Lucart at the University of Minnesota, and they paid for, I think, about half of it. And then Jerry brought in, I don't know, 7 or 8 other entities, because I didn't know anybody. It was my second or third band piece, and the first one was commissioned by the Army, and the second one was a BandQuest piece. If you guys know BandQuest, American Composers Forum has a really great series. They've got Choral Quest, bringing choral music to younger singers, and BandQuest is all about bringing band music to middle schoolers. So those were each one-offs, right? One commissioner each. So suddenly Immersion comes up shortly after Paper Cutter, around the same time. I know nobody. I don't know anybody in the band world. This is 2010, 2011, 2010, I guess. And Jerry took care of it, and that's an example. He brought in Yale, he brought in Ohio State, he brought in Whitewater, Wisconsin, he brought in a whole bunch of schools, he brought in the University of British Columbia. And some of these schools have continued through the years to commission, to be part of, and certainly to perform everything that I write. So it's all based on these relationships. So as I got, a little more established in the band world, suddenly my database grew, and suddenly I was able to be as powerful, if not more powerful, even than my band directors, of reaching out personally. And I think the personal thing can't be stressed enough. Because to me, everything is about relationships. Most of you have heard me say that a million times. I've been on Anthony's wonderful one-track show, his podcast, yay, and Garrett's show, right?
And you were just on the incredible BandQuest podcast, came out yesterday, Mark Connor's show.
Everything band. So, so I gab about this all the time, and I keep saying the same thing because it's so vital to our perception of how we create our careers. And I'm pretty sure everybody here is saying the same thing, to their friends. It's like, it's about this. And in my case, because I choose to live on a remote little island with no bridge, unless I happen to be out and about in the world traveling, everything I do is via video. And one of the things I do, here in the studio, for example, because my pieces are electroacoustic, all but the first one are all electroacoustic. So I build in the opportunity, for people to get a tour of how are these pieces put together, and that's kind of groovy for the young artists. But all the other Skypes people pay for, and that's one thing. I'm going to throw this in, and then we'll move off from me. But I want to throw in that when I'm making money from the Skypersals, and I'm giving them as much value added as I can with that whole process, that makes up for the lack of royalties, the lack of performance royalties, either because high schools are not licensed, as you guys all know, or because the way ASCAP does it, and BMI is not dissimilar, you're not going to have every one of your performances, even in a university, caught in the sample, which means that we are not paid, unfortunately, for every performance of our work. So that means we have to put our thinking caps on and figure out, okay, how can we generate income from other new things that didn't even exist 15 years ago, like Skype? How can we generate income and make up for and make more for things that we're not getting, whether it's performance royalties or, let's say, mechanical royalties, right? I mean, I know I'm getting off topic, but the point is your database is the hub for all of this, for all of these people. So always put in, a little bit of information for everybody, because you will dive back into that pool and be able to fund your pieces.
That's really great advice. Thank you so much. Let's spend a few minutes. I know we probably only want to talk for about 10 more minutes before we open it up to Q&A. let's talk about the idea of adding value and what that can look like in different situations, because there's lots of ways to do that. And let's also tie that in with multiple buy-in levels and how you could distinguish what you're doing. Michael, do you want to start that one off?
Yeah. So, the big thing for me with the added value is the Skype sessions.
Okay, I'm going to stop you real quick. I'm clarifying question. Why is that adding value to the consortium? What does the ensemble or the director get out of it that makes it worth it?
The big thing that I found is they're very excited to meet a living composer. That is just right there for them to be able to ask questions of how you made this, what was going on in your mind when you made this. Every single one that's been the big part of giving that Skype session. So, to talk about your piece, to talk about the history of it, like with me, with the Child Refugee Awareness Choral Consortium, they wanted to know all about how I found Lamia, this 9-year-old refugee. And so I tell them the story of, how I discovered the poem and how I contacted the publisher and how the publisher set out to find Lamia on the other side of the world and how she found Lamia. And then also they want to know, like, well, why did you put this here? Why did you put that? And the other really cool thing that I'm finding too is they also, it's funny because I was able to do one session live, not Skype, but actually visit because they're a local group. They actually provided even deeper insight than what I realized was in the song. So these high school kids were like saying, I think you did this because this relates to this and this and this. And I was like, yeah, let's say that I actually did think of that. And it was great. And then they loved that. They loved the fact that they dug so deep that, they actually were finding these things that, you're like, yeah, that actually that's part of it, that works. So anyway, I think the value is just that, them getting to ask questions. They're very shy at first, by the way. For just a little tip, when you start the Skype sessions, especially if it's a choir director that hasn't done it before or a new band director, there'll be a little bit of pauses and everything. But once the ball gets rolling, they're usually very eager to get their questions out. The questions start rolling out. Then it's like, oh yeah, now I'll ask my question. Now that my friend asked theirs, and that kind of thing. So don't worry about that. I was nervous the first couple of times I did a Skype session, thinking, what if I run out of things to talk about and everything? And you don't. You get once the conversation gets going. The other thing too that Alex, I'm sure, will agree with me on this. I've heard you talk about this before. Is and this is very true with choral music. I wonder if it's the same with band music. But it's almost impossible sometimes to actually hear them perform if they don't have good equipment. And when they were singing, whenever they held out a sustained note, the sound cut out. Now, how can you actually do a Skype session to listen to a performance with the sound cut out? And it was still successful. It still was a successful Skype session because I was able to hear enough to be able to kind of comment generally on their piece, but there was no way to actually get a better Skype session out of that. And I had to make the best of it. And it was still really good quality, great discussion afterwards. But be prepared for that. Test out the equipment beforehand, but even with testing it out, the technology is not always there for a good actual, being able to really listen and being able to even hear the music itself. Yeah.
That's really, really true. I can definitely pick up where Michael's leaving off, because one of the things, compression, we might even have a great connection. I finally, after all 11 years on the island, just 2 weeks ago, I got fiber optic. Okay, so this is awesome.
Yay.
Hopefully I'm really clear now. But I used to look like I was as underwater as the whales out here, at 1.5 megabits per second. That's what I had for a decade. And I still managed to do everything I was doing. But even with a fast connection, the services, they throttle things and they compress things. And as Michael's saying, there is no way you're going to be able to say, second trombone, measure 52, you know, you missed your entrance or whatever. You're not going to hear that. But here's the magic bullet for that one. I have increasingly asked band directors or choral directors or anybody, whoever you're working with, a chamber group, etc. I ask them to send me, put their iPhone on the, you know, in the room, just turn it on to the recording thing in there. Everybody's got a recording thing on their phone, and record a run through of the piece and send me the MP3. Problem solved, because then I can listen to what it actually really does sound like, and that actually prepares me to be able to comment a little bit more helpfully. Ultimately, if you don't even get a chance to do that, and as Michael's pointing out, the connection is less than ideal, you know what still comes through beautifully is your heart, is this. This is what it's all about. We keep circling back to that. It becomes an invaluable and memorable experience for the musicians, and particularly young musicians. And of course, in the band world, I'm dealing with a lot of younger musicians who will be our peers, or will end up being doctors and plumbers and everybody else, and love music, go to concerts, one or the other. But that connection, and I get emails all the time from people, whether it's the conductors themselves or the musicians, saying, you know, or even long time afterwards, telling me what the experience meant to them. So that's a big, big win. I want to give you guys one example relating to Garrett's specific question about how are we using Skype, etc. I had in 2015, one of the pieces I wrote was a highly interactive, from the ground up piece that's called Lights Out. And it was designed from the get-go to be like, what kind of weird things is an up-tempo groove piece, okay? What kind of weird things can we do? What kind of whiz-bang things can we do visually, physically, etc., within a performance, a standard performance thing, context, to make a piece a really different experience for the audience. And of course, by dint of that, the musicians. So what I did, this was one of those, this consortium I think had 19 schools on it. And before I had written a note of music, I Skyped in to each of those schools and had these amazing conversations with them where I'm asking them, I said, I've got the music thing covered. I really did not want musical ideas from anybody, right? I did not want that. Stay out of my music world. But what I did from them, what I did want was all the ideas, no matter how crazy. I wanted them to be as creative as possible and tell me, what could we do visually? What could we do physically? You know, I mean, they came up with everything imaginable. I ended up with about over 200 separate ideas. And as they were talking to me about their ideas, you know, animals running across the stage, or, you know, fire or whatever, silly string, I don't know, they came up with everything. And I would scribe, you know, I'd be talking to them and writing it down. And then when I was done with that part of the process, each time I'd curate the ideas into different categories, so to kind of keep them straight. And I, of course, had my own ideas too of a few things I knew I wanted to do with this. So the end shot is they're directly collaborating with me, if you will, on this new piece that they are part of, and that their school's name and their band director's name is going to be in the score forevermore. And in the back matter or front matter of the score are all those ideas. And then I encourage every new band that plays it to come up with their own ideas and let me know what they are, and post their performances on YouTube. And in the new editions of the score, you know, I will absolutely add those ideas. So it becomes this growing, interactive, engaging thing. And it was
That's beautiful.
Really successful. It was really fun. And this is one of those pieces where I want more and more people to put their performances up on YouTube, because it's very visual.
Yeah. Was that one of the CSIG consortiums?
I'm trying to think. Yes, I did 3 of those. So yes, it was composers and schools in concert. For anybody here who's really interested in doing work with high school kids, in the case of composers and schools in concert, CSIC. And Garrett will probably put the link up while we're talking or something. Garrett's done a piece with them. I've done 3 pieces with them. I don't know if any of you guys have.
Not yet.
Yeah, I've done 2.
You've done 2. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Excellent. They are wonderful people. And it's just, and it's a consortium based thing. I will take credit for being the one that told them how to do consortiums. They hadn't done one before.
That's
And
awesome.
I said, Lisa Oman, I was the head, and I said, this is how to put this together. And it's been really, really fun.
Can I jump in on your?
I'm sorry, Michael, what?
I just want to share with you along the lines of what you're talking about getting the ideas and everything from the different groups beforehand with the Skype session. My experience, I have a similar experience with this new one, the Great American Coral Reef, which is very much improvising and creating your own performance based on the parameters that I give. And I actually presented it preliminarily before I even launched the idea of recruiting choirs at Queens College. I was invited to the NAFME conference at Queens College. And one of the college students there, it's a beautiful thing. She actually works with autistic kids. And she's like, will this work with autistic kids? And I said, now it will. I said, yes, the Great American Coral Reef will definitely work with autistic kids. And so it was like, again, that whole entire thing about getting the buzz beforehand. When I went to Pittsburgh, I had a whole entire booth set up, and I just want to kind of throw out the idea of, man, recruiting for consortiums. If you have a good presentation, a very polished presentation, and you can afford to set up a booth at one of these conferences, you'll get people to join your consortium. That there's a lot of real interest in collaborating with groups and something creative. But I'll say this. One of the directors actually that came up to me said, we have no, she's a college choir director, and she said, we have no music majors in our choir. But we have a strong music dance program, and we have a strong art program. It was, I think, Alfred College in Western New York. And she's like, would that work for us? I said, yeah. I said, this is great. I said, she's like, she wants to include dance now. She wants to include art. And it was like, so the idea of, actually having those conversations beforehand and really listening to what people's strengths are. And then showing them that there is a match to your consortium, especially, the creative ones. I totally see what you're saying. And I love the idea of having a Skype session beforehand, like you did with that particular group, and just listening. Because, man, that gives them ownership. And, basically one of the things I did actually is I brought a microphone and my iPhone to the conference. And for this particular consortium, they have to sing this shape. I don't know if you could see it there. It's a hyperbolic paraboloid, and it's basically the shape of coral. And they have to sing this shape, whatever that means to them. And there's no wrong answers. And so I recorded all these different people, singing the shape at this conference. And there were, there are guest choirs there, right? Visiting choirs, presenting choirs. So I had middle schoolers come, and they got their friends because they were so excited about it. And then they went and got their teacher. They dragged their teacher over, said, look, we did this, And, so the idea of generating that buzz beforehand is, if there's a way to do it,
Amazing. I want to put one more thing in there also, which is the math. And this blows my mind to this day. If you're doing like 20 schools or 20 participants, let's say 20 bands in my case, each band has a minimum of 50 people in it. Some have twice as much, but let's take the number 50. And you're doing 20 of them. That means that how many people have interacted with you even before they've played the music? I mean, that is an enormous number. That is just a fantastic thing. So
we need to move on to do a Q&A. I just want to be respectful of people's times. So here's the thing. If you look at, there's a way for you to raise your hand in the software, and that'll let me know if you want me to let you in. I know you're not in a hurry, and I could stay on here too, but let's be respectful of our honored guests. Alex still probably hasn't even had supper because she's on
You're right. I have not. It's only 5:49 here, so I'm fine.
Yep. But one thing I want to show you guys, if you listen to my interview with Paul Rudoy, who's an amazing choral composer and conductor, you got to go to San Juan Island. That Paul is doing is he and another friend are starting a business called Consortio, and I just put the link in the chat. And I was going to be a beta tester on this platform for this new consortium we're building, but they couldn't get the legal stuff wrapped up before we had our own deadlines, so I couldn't do it. But this will handle the admin, contracts, payment processing, and a lot of the stuff that we haven't covered in this discussion. There's a lot of admin that takes place to manage a consortium. But we're out of time, so that could be saved for another conversation. One thing that I've done, just to give you ideas, is I just built this page on my website to kind of sell it. So I describe what we're doing, what the intention is, the kind of music we want to write, and then I describe the benefits per buy-in, what the price is, and then Aaron Given, the lead director, and I created basically a Google form. And that's how we're getting people to sign the bottom line with a little basic statement saying, I agree, I'm going to pay these fees by these deadlines and so on. So there's lots of ways to do this, but I want to share the floor in the time we have left with anyone who is interested in asking us a question directly. I don't see any hands, so you could just say you're there. Oh, hands went up immediately. Okay. I am going to call you in, Chris. I'm asking you to start video, and then we'll do Luke right after you. So, Chris, introduce yourself, say where you are and what you're currently working on, and then ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Hey, I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I'm actually sitting in a parking lot because I have a rehearsal in a few minutes. But my question is, in terms of finding other people to join a consortia or consortiums, whatever, how do you feel about cold calling people that you know of who are with the ensembles that you're looking for? Like, is that kind of a faux pas? Is it best to just stick with who you know and have worked with before and hope for a natural growth that way? Or is it okay to, just kind of reach out to someone that you know of that might be interested in working with you? I guess my fear is I'm afraid of turning people off if I did something like that. So I'd just love to hear any thoughts on that. Thanks.
Alex, why don't you take that one?
I've never done that because I've been always thinking, that it's someone who knows me, who's had a relationship with me on one level or another, or at least has bought my music and played it, that would be most interested. I wouldn't rule it out totally, but I will say, and I'm sure you already know this, that I think your chances of someone saying yes are going to be diminished. It doesn't mean that it would never happen, especially if you have a really great project to suggest to them. If you've got a whiz-bang kind of idea that's really kind of outside the box, that's very you, that's very different. If you can connect that with a particular reason why you are contacting this particular person, that could work. In other words, if you're doing, something rock-based, I don't know why this is coming to my head, and you happen to know of a band director who started his life or her life as a geologist. Seriously, it's like, hey, there's a natural connection. We haven't met personally, but I know of your background, and I wanted to let you know about this project I'm starting because I think it might be of interest to you. Now, that's a personal enough email. I think the point is personalize it however you can. We all get emails from people that we don't know, and there's no reason for us to care. Anytime you write an email to somebody like that, make sure that they, as an individual, have a reason to care. Who are we? Why are we contacting them? Otherwise, it ends in the trash can.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's great advice. I would essentially say the same thing. Make it personal, make it relevant, keep it short, right? You need to provide links to your social proof and other things you do in the email so people can go somewhere. Don't provide attachments or it gets flagged. I think short's also really important. I personally struggle with responding to an email that's longer than 250 words if it's from someone I don't know. So otherwise, I agree with everything Alex said.
And you can definitely put in a link, but don't put in a whole bunch of links. Point them, let's say if I were going to pitch somebody I don't know on a piece that I thought would be particularly of interest to them, I would include one link to something else I've done that would showcase, what I do and why, very pointed.
Right.
And absolutely, as Garrett is saying, keep it short and simple.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to Luke, who had his hand raised next. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
It's great to
Have a
see
good
you,
rehearsal.
Hello.
All right. Hey, please
All right.
introduce
So,
yourself and then ask your question.
yeah, my name is Luke. I'm kind of a very part-time composer. I've done a lot of things many years ago. I don't really compose these days much anymore. I'm too busy performing. But I think Alex really kind of partially answered my question already. I kind of wanted to know the difference, because I'm kind of new to this game, between, Kickstarter and Patreon versus, one of these consortiums that you guys have been talking about. But I think it's the personal aspect, right? Is that kind of the difference?
That, and also if you're doing Kickstarter, let's say, or any of the number of crowdfunding apps, the problem is those are usually not tied to a performance. And what you want, if you're asking people to fund a piece, you want them to also be invested in performing it. So when you do a consortium, you're solving that problem. If you're just raising money from Kickstarter, then you still have the issue of how am I going to get performances of this piece, and you still have to reach out to a lot of places to do that. It's not bad. I mean, you'll get money to
Sure.
to compose what you want to compose, but it's sort of one-stop shopping when you do it with an ensemble.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Michael?
No, although there's no. I think that really did. I have something I want to add, but I think it's another question actually that I have about it.
Sure. I think one thing.
I'll let other people ask their questions though.
Sure. I think one thing that's going on is that Patreon is good for getting people not kind of outside your immediate community to participate. Like when I see a really successful campaign, it's not just the people who are interested in the music you might be making. They want to actually support the creation of something a little bit bigger. Like maybe they just want to support new arts. And the nice thing about a consortium are the people who will really be out there performing the piece when it's done. Now, I think there are ways, and both Michael and Alex talked about this, of getting other sponsorships involved. But I don't see that being the right platform for it. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Nice to see you, Luke. All right. There were a few other unraised hands, so I'm going to bring in Haley real fast. Hey, there you are.
All hail Haley.
All hail Haley. All right. Asked to start video and unmute. Hi, Haley. Introduce yourself once you come on and ask your question. I hope you're coming on. I think I clicked all the right buttons. Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can't see you yet, though, but go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, well, I'm Haley Woodrow, and I'm also based in DFW, just like Chris. Oh, hold on. Maybe. Oh, there we go. Okay. And I'm outside. I'm tired of being in my composition studio. So anyway, my question is, you had said, Garrett, that we may do like another conference call where we talk more about contracts and stuff and the admin end. So I'm sorry to ask a question about it, but I'm in the middle of organizing a consortium for concert band works. And my question is, are there legal issues with each individual band director signing a contract?
Alex, I'm going to let you take that.
That's a good question. Usually the individual band director runs it past their dean or whatever. I mean, sometimes they just pull it out of their discretionary funds, especially if it's a smaller commission, $500, $400, $300, If it's, I guess if it's $1,000 or more, they probably would run it by their dean or something like that, I'm guessing. But beyond that, I don't know if they have any contracts. My experience is that it comes out of their discretionary funds, whatever their budget is, and whatever they can afford to do.
And I am so sorry. I should have said it's for public school. So it's middle. It's not colleges. It's middle school, high schools. Yeah.
My guess would be it would be the the head of the school that would approve it for a public school. Garrett, Michael, do you have a sense of that? Nope, I can't. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So it seems to be that it's different, based on each state or even just in district. There's It's complicated. I haven't really got a good grasp on that yet, just because I'm just at the very beginning, and only a handful of my groups were public school. You are providing something unique, so it's not like they can bid it out. I think that's, like in New York, they always have to bid things out. That's why I don't make many direct sales from my own website. They buy through JW Pepper because they have a contract with JW Pepper. It's very easy for them to not have to go through the paperwork of bringing me on. But that's the other thing too, is when you actually you have to sometimes have to go through being a vendor when you work through the public schools, and it's a lot of paperwork, but generally they're very good at helping you fill that out.
So it doesn't concern you if you don't have a contract in place. If somebody says, I'm going to be part of the consortium.
I think contracts are always a good thing because it just clarifies expectations, and it also can outline what will happen if certain parts are not fulfilled, either on your end or their end. And I have never encountered a problem with the contract working with a public school, because usually all the contract is saying is, I commit to pay this money by a certain time, in a similar way as if they were going to send out an invoice or a purchase order.
Okay.
And the contract also protects them, because it means that if the composer doesn't deliver the piece, they get their money back,
Yeah, they have recourse.
Or whatever. Or if something happens that's out of the composer's hands, maybe the composer just doesn't get the second half, or, there are all kinds of terms in the contract that protect both sides. And I agree completely with Garrett that absolutely there should be a contract, and it's usually a very simple contract. That's different than getting approval for the funds, et cetera, for the school. That's what I thought you were asking about before. But definitely you want a contract.
And Michael brought up a good point. Some districts, especially if you exceed a minimum, it's different everywhere, of price that you've earned, money, you might have to fill out a W-9 or do whatever process they have to become a vendor. It's usually just one or two forms. It does take time, but it's not onerous.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you're in their system, so that's good.
Yeah. Thanks, Haley. I'm gonna bring someone else on. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Thank you.
All right, we are at the time. So I just first of all want to say thank you to Alex and Michael. And if you guys need to get off, that's fine. I will stay on the video chat. Okay, you're good?
Fine.
Okay, I will send you a glass of whiskey virtually. All right,
I'm good for another 3 minutes, and then I have to go pick up my daughter. But I'll just my final closing thought is, be through this whole entire process, and I think Alex really helped me out a lot about this when I heard you come speak at New York. Is be uniquely yourself. Be the purple cow. For those of you that know that book, The Purple Cow, as those people that have known me for a while know that I am very much myself now, more than I've ever been before. And that is part of the draw, right? A consortium is because they want to work with the composer. So you are part of, what draws them in. So be yourself, be wonderfully yourself, be uniquely yourself, and don't be afraid to be a little silly at times, and just embrace the whole entire thing, and they'll embrace you.
Yeah. You're here.
And I encourage everyone to download Mark Connor's Everything Band interview with Alex, because she does a really good job of explaining why you should not think you're incompetent. I'm just going to leave that there. Listen to it. It's worth the time. All right, so welcome, Satu. This is our Finland guest, who is now 4 a.m. She's committed. She's joined.
Wow.
So, please ask your question.
Yeah, thank you for this is my first group coaching call, and I'm really excited about this. This is a really nice concept, but I've never heard about it before, and I'm wondering if people do it in Europe, if you know, because I feel like I need some advice on, like, how would I introduce like a completely new concept like this for anyone who would like to order like my music.
Yes. In Europe, yes, I have a choir from London, a choir from Oman, a choir from the United Arab Emirates. So I don't know. I mean, they were all contacts through Facebook, And what was nice is that the American schools actually are very closely connected with each other that are in these countries, which is the case for Oman and UAE. So they had friends who worked with each other, which was kind of neat. Oh, I don't have to leave. That's good. I just got a message that my daughter is being picked up. So yay, I can stay. Anyway, so I mean, somebody else can expand on the idea of reaching out to groups in Europe. But I think that through Facebook, I was able to establish, some connections, to not just Europe, but like I said, the Middle East.
Yeah, and I would say that in general, just as we did here, pretty briefly, actually, I summarized in the very top of this conversation, what is a consortium and why does it work? I think you could do that with anybody you approach and just say, I would love to put together a number of participants to help bring a new piece of mine to life. Would you like to be part of it? And then they'll say, yeah, what? Tell me more. And then you can explain how it works. Because it's not a very hard concept. It's pretty simple, actually. It's just collective. So I think you could definitely, Satu, you could definitely tell them, just tell them how it works and make the suggestion. There's no reason why it shouldn't work for you.
Sure. Yeah, agreed.
I think most people, no matter where they are going to understand that commissioning a piece can require a lot of money. And a lot of these groups are also going to recognize that they probably can't front all of that themselves. So you can just sell this on the idea that it's a way for everybody to participate in the creation of something brand new for less money than it takes to be the sole commissioner. And especially if you have people spread out geographically, then it's a great win, because then you can have these regional premieres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Satu.
Thanks.
All right. All right, I'm going to bring in Anthony. Okay, Anthony, you're coming in. You're unmuted, I think. There you are.
Hey, Anthony.
Welcome.
Hey.
Whoa, you're dark.
Hold on. It might get really bright. Hold on.
There he is.
Okay. So, hey, everybody. It's nice to see you.
Hey.
Hi. So my question for you guys is that all this information is really, really good and great. We've been talking almost exclusively about large ensembles and really large educational ensembles. And I just got this commission from this sax quartet, and I was thinking of trying to maybe make it into a consortium, and they're professional. So would you have any advice on doing that on a professional level with a smaller chamber group?
Well, as we know, there are so many sax quartets out there now looking for new music, and it's the same concept. As long as there isn't an ego involved with this particular quartet wanting to take all the glory, for your piece, assuming that they would simply like to add to the repertoire of sax quartets, of original sax quartets that are not transcriptions of string quartets and other things, but an original one that they're adding to the repertoire, and they could be your best allies in finding other sax quartets around the world who would be interested in coming in with them on the piece. At that point, they should be your lead commissioner and work with you to bring in more participants. So the only way it would be a problem is if that quartet decides, oh, we just want it to be our piece, in which case, well, then it's pay to play, right? You can't do it.
Right.
Almost no money. You gotta be paid. So you gotta buy groceries. So that I would approach them and just say, wouldn't this be amazing if we got a bunch of sax quartets together to bring this to life? Yeah. And then you can always offer them the first premiere or something like that.
Right.
And even though they're professional, don't discount, say, graduate quartets at university. I mean, those are all, they're semi-professional at minimum, right? So I would actually include saxophone professors in your list of people you'd reach out to, because they're going to be most connected to whatever's happening in their local saxophone scene. Or if you have an in with NASA, which is the North American Saxophone Alliance or something like that. And they just had this huge conference. So
I just performed there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Is that how you got the commission then?
No, the commission came before. Yeah, I just played there like a couple of weeks ago, a piece for sax and electric guitar. Yeah.
How cool. Did you have to wear a spacesuit and everything? Did you get to?
I would totally have worn a spacesuit.
Well, tell me you want to launch a new piece.
Yeah.
Brava.
The long and short of it is, I think it's entirely possible to even do this with soloists.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. That's that idea I hadn't even considered. So
I'm doing it right now, by the way, with my next commission is for flute and percussion and electronics, and it's starting out with a duo. They are probably bringing another duo in, and they asked me how I would feel about writing for 2 flutists and 2 percussionists. I said, great, the more the merrier. Yeah. But we put together a very big Google Doc of our relevant contacts of who we would reach out to fund this. And so many of their people on their list are fellow flutists and percussionists, and many of them are, as Garrett's saying, on faculty at different schools. So that's a really viable way to do it. And of course, they're going to have the most interest in it, not only for themselves, but for their studios, right? For their students.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Do it.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to bring Pam in, and as far as I can tell, that's the last hand raised. So we're just going to say we are going to let Pam be our last one. Hello, Pam. Nice to see you.
Hey there. How are you all?
Good.
Hi, Pam.
Great discussion. I'm really enjoying it. My question is for, I have not written for band, and I've been thinking about writing for band. I have plenty of chamber music, choral music, or a little bit of orchestra, and as well as orchestra arrangements for holiday music. But does it make sense to try to do a consortium for your very first band piece, or is it better to work with an individual band first and use that as a calling card for the next one?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, I worked with an individual band first, and that was a really great way to have the guidance, to know my ass from my elbow of what I was doing, So I had, a nice relationship with someone who was close to the piece. And so that was very helpful. The conductor was part of that experience for me when I had a question about, which end of the euphonium do you blow through? And so I think if you can do it with one group, that would be ideal. But again, there are no rules. And if you happen to be with the good fortune of knowing a few band directors that you could invite, saying, hey, this is exciting. It's my first band piece. You've got a big catalog. You've written lots of stuff. So it's not like they're taking a chance on you in that sense. You know how to compose well. But I don't think there's any reason why you shouldn't try a consortium model. But maybe what I would recommend is have a good lead commissioner, as we have said earlier, so that you have somebody to really lean on for the process and for the questions that come up. Because band is a whole other animal than chamber music. I was only doing chamber music before band. I had never written a band piece. I'd never been to a band concert in my entire life until 2008 when I had my first piece.
Yeah.
So that's my thought. Michael, do you have a thought about this?
No, actually. I mean, I haven't dabbled in band. I have some band pieces written, but I haven't published them or anything like that. So in terms of starting with the commissioner, I mean, yeah, I think that starting with an individual band would. If I was to pursue the pieces that I want to write, I would start with an individual band probably first, just because there's one set of wishes and desires and everything coming at you, and you don't need to please everybody the first time around. So I would agree with that.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Have you ever experienced dissatisfied people when everybody else is thoroughly happy?
Yes.
Why would they be satisfied?
Okay, so one of my pieces in the Child Refugee Awareness Choral Consortium was Lamia's song. I wrote 2 pieces, like I said. The second one was easier so that I could include elementary and middle school. And one of the elementary teachers wrote to me, sent me an email right away, or not right away, but sent me an email in the process. And it was a very lengthy email saying how she's concerned about this not working because of this reason and this reason and this reason. And I immediately wrote back to her and said, thank you for writing this. this is wonderful suggestions. I said, by you sharing this information, other groups will probably have those same concerns, and now you've made this a better song. And she wrote back to me right away, and she's like, I didn't think that you would be so open to my suggestions and everything, not because of any, person, just because of the fact that she's talking to the composer and presenting issues. Yeah. And I that's one suggestion I have is, especially as you're, like I said, I'm starting out, is you can, every single suggestion you get will make that commission. I mean, look, there might be some nitpicky people, but I haven't run into them yet. But every single suggestion you get is just going to make that consortium better, the music better, and also your future pieces better, because you're getting feedback as to what works and what doesn't work. So, so in the case of this elementary choir, I actually had to change the range because it was beginning singers. It was starting singers, and so I had to actually change. I had to modify the song a bit, and it still is, very powerful song and everything. But I changed some of the intervals so that the range was smaller. I also made it more repetitive in that case, and she was thrilled.
Mm-hmm. I think Michael brings up a really important point that I would say all of us keep learning with every piece. It doesn't matter how many pieces you've written, all of us are learning all the time. And because we're usually pushing ourselves and experimenting with things and trying to learn, how to do things or try things out that we haven't done before. And I can't underscore what Michael's saying enough about the glory of constructive feedback from the people with whom we're working. It's a free education for us. I think it's a free education, like, wow, thank you for that. And sometimes they'll catch, bonehead maneuvers, like, writing something a little bit out of range, your half note off of where their range is, or you didn't catch an accident, like, D is the lowest note, but oops, you wrote D flat, that kind of stupid thing. It happens, right? And it's really good to have the errata, pointed out. And other times it's orchestration thoughts. Yeah. Yeah,
I've had people catch, when you extract parts. It's like editing a book. There's almost always going to be an error, and so they catch those. Or I've even had players just say, "Can you please just do this one thing for me?" And if there's not a good reason not to, and it's actually helping what I want to do musically. It's a way to get their participation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, another win-win situation. I mean, I don't think that egos have a place in that aspect of it, in a collaborative art where you want other people to be, performing your work. If you're only going to do, let's say, if I was only going to write a solely electronic piece, great. Mm-hmm. It's the best world for a control freak ever, because I don't need anybody's input. No one has to play it. I'm just going to, and it will always be the same every time it's ever played. But the joy for all of us, I think, is working with live humans and having that interpretive back and forth. And that's going to mean some ebb and flood on our part as artists as well, and growth. So it's all good.
Yeah. To kind of go back to your original question, I mean, I write for band and choirs, so I, as kind of the framer of this whole thing, it is coming from my perspective, but I'm also well aware of the fact that of all the ensembles and educational groups in the United States, those two commission more music than probably anyone else.
Right.
And no one really knows the estimates because these are privately held companies, but most people think that the sheet music industry for band alone could be somewhere between $10 to $100 million a year for band alone.
Wow.
So then you think about, these are groups that are actively seeking and asking composers to write new music. So I personally have a little strategy. I want to write for the people who want to, or are already paying for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get an orchestra to do that right now. Not that it's impossible, it's just difficult.
Right.
And unfortunately, the way that business is set up, that, with major orchestras, they'll play the piece once or twice and then it sits on the shelf. And then adding insult to injury, often their contracts demand that they have exclusive rights to the piece for about a year, if not longer. At which point, all the buzz for the new work has gone out the window. So it's just backward,
Yeah.
Not how it should be. Bands and choirs have the right idea. So, and interestingly, in educational facilities, you have full overturn in 4 years. So think of it this way, a band director who's there long-term knows, they'll probably do a piece that they like more than once in those 4 years, but they really know that their new incoming freshmen after 4 years have never seen the piece. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're going to call it a night. Let's all thank our guests. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Michael. This has been tremendous. If people are interested in continuing this discussion and learning more, like especially the administrative part of what has to happen, we can plan that for another discussion, and we'll just tackle that then. But I appreciate both of you so very much.
We appreciate you,
And you
Garrett.
too. Yes,
and
absolutely.
all of you guys. I mean, this is so great to have this conversation with peers. All of how many, 11 of us, whatever. We're all doing the same thing. We're trying to express ourselves through art and make these connections. So you are such a great ringleader for bringing us all together. And as a
Amen.
traveler, so thank you. And
Thank you.
Michael, you are awesome in terms of watching your career go. Woo, watching what you've been up to since I met you. It's been really, really very hip.
Thanks, Alex. You have a lot to do with it, so I appreciate you.
True inspiration. All right, friends. I'll spread the word about the next call in a month. So everyone have a great rest of your day and keep writing music. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.